Hi there, how you doing? I'm going to read Allen Ginsberg's poem Howl. Uh, he first performed this at Sixth Gallery in San Francisco on October 7, 1955. And that's why I like it, because I was born 6 days before that. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of the night, who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high set-up smoking in the supernatural darkness of the cold water flats, floating across the tops of cities contemplating jazz, who bared their brains to heaven under the L and saw Mohammedan angels staggering on tenement roofs illuminated, who passed through universities with radiant, cool eyes hallucinating Arkansas and Blake-like tragedy among scholars of war, who were expelled from the academics for crazy and publishing obscene odes on the window of the skull, who cowered in unshaven rooms in underwear, burning their money in wastebaskets and listening to the terror through the wall, who got busted in their public beards returning through Laredo with a belt of marijuana for New York, who ate fire in paint hotels or drank turpentine in Paradise Alley, death or purgatoried their torsos night after night with dreams, with drugs, with waking nightmares, alcohol and cock and endless balls, incomparable blind streets of shuddering cloud and lightning in the mind leaping toward poles of Canada and Patterson, illuminating the motionless worlds of time between. Peyote solidities of halls, backyard green cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness over the rooftops, storefront burls of tea-head joyride, neon blinking traffic light, sun and moon and tree vibrations in the roaring winter dusk of Brooklyn, ashcan rantings and kind king light of mine, who chained themselves to subways for the endless ride to Battery, to Holy Bronx on Benzedrine, until the noise of wheels and children brought them down, shuddering, mouth racked and battered, bleak and brain all drained of brilliance in the drear light of zoo, who sank all night in the submarine light of Bickford's, floated out and sank through the stale beer afternoon, in desolate fugazis, listening to the crack of doom on the hydrogen jukebox, who talked continuously 70 hours from park to pad to bar to Bellevue to museum, to the Brooklyn Bridge, a lost battalion of platonic conversationalists jumping down the stoops off fire escapes, off windowsills, off Empire State, out of the moon, yakety-yakking, scream, vomiting, whispering facts and memories and anecdotes and eyeball kicks and shocks of hospitals and jails and wars, whole intellects disgorged in total recall for 7 days and nights with brilliant eyes meet for the synagogue cast on the pavement, who vanished into nowheres in New Jersey, leaving a trail of ambiguous picture postcards of Atlantic City Hall, suffering eastern sweats and Tangerian bone grindings and migraines of China under junk withdrawal in New York's bleak furnished room, who wandered around and around at midnight in the railroad yard wondering where to go and went, leaving no broken hearts, who lit cigarettes in boxcars, racketing through the snow toward lonesome farms in grandfather night, who studied Plotinus, Poe, St. John of the Cross, telepathy, Bop, Kabbalah, because the cosmos instinctively vibrated at their feet in Kansas, who loaned it through the streets of Idaho seeking visionary Indian angels who were visionary Indian angels, who thought they were mad only when Baltimore gleamed in the supernatural ecstasy, who jumped in limousines with the Chinamen of Oklahoma on the impulse of winter, midnight, streetlight, small-town rain, who lounged hungry and lonesome through Houston seeking jazz or sex or soup, and followed the brilliant Spaniard to converse about America and eternity, a hopeless task, and so took ship to Africa, who disappeared into the volcanoes of Mexico, leaving behind nothing but the shadow of dungarees and the lava and ash and poetry scattered in fireplace Chicago, who reappeared on the West Coast investigating the FBI in beards and shorts with big pacifist eyes, sexy in their dark skin, passing out incomprehensible leaflets, who burned secret holes in their arms protecting the narcotic tobacco haze of capitalism, who distributed super-communist pamphlets in Union Squares, weeping and undressing while sirens of Los Alamos wailed them down and wailed down Wall, and the Staten Island ferry also wailed, who broke down crying in white gymnasiums, naked and trembling before the machinery of other skeletons, who bit detectives in the neck and shrieked with delight in police cars for committing no crime but their own wild cooking pederasty and intoxication, who howled on their knees in the subway and were dragged off the roof waving genitals and manuscripts, who let themselves be fucked in the ass by saintly motorcyclists and screamed with joy and blew and were blown by those human seraphim, the sailors, caresses of Atlantic and Caribbean love, who bawled in the morning and in the evening in rose gardens in the grass of the public parks and cemeteries, scattering their semen freely to whomever come who may, who hiccuped aimlessly, trying to giggle, but wound up with a sob behind a partition in a Turkish bath when the blonde and naked angel came to pierce them with a sword, who lost their love boys to the three old shrews of fate, the one-eyed shrew of the heterosexual dollar, the one-eyed shrew that winks out of the womb, and the one-eyed shrew that does nothing but sit on her ass and snip the intellectual golden threads of the craftsman's loom, who copulated ecstatic and insatiate with a bottle of beer, a sweetheart, a package of cigarettes, a candle, and fell off the bed and continued along the floor and down the hall, and ending fainting on the wall with a vision of the ultimate cunt and come eluding the last jism of consciousness, who sweetened the snatches of million girls trembling in the sunset, and were red-eyed in the morning, but prepared to sweeten the snatch of the sunrise, flashing buttocks under the barns and naked in the lake, who went out whoring through Colorado in myriad stolen night cars, North Carolina, secret hero of the poems, coxswain of Adonis of Denver, joy to the memory of his innumerable lays of girls in empty lots and diners, backyard movie houses, rickety rows and mountaintops and caves, or with a gaunt waitress, a familiar roadside petticoat uplifting and especially secret gas station solecisms of John's and hometown alleys too, who faded out in vast sordid movies and shifted in dreams, woke on a sudden Manhattan and picked themselves up out of the basement hungover with heartless Tokay and horrors of Third Avenue iron dreams, and stumbled to unemployment offices, who walked all night with their shoes full of blood on the snow-banked docks waiting for the door of the East River to open to a full room of steam and heat and opium, who created great suicidal dramas on the apartment cliff banks of the Hudson under the wartime blur of the floodlight of the moon, and their heads shall be crowned with laurel in oblivion, who ate lamb stew of the imagination and digested the crabs of the muddy bottoms of the rivers of the Bowery, who wept at the romance of the streets and with the push cars full of onions and bad music, who sat in boxes breathing in the darkness under the bridge and rose up to build harpsichords in their lofts, who coughed on the 6th floor of Harlem crowned with flame under the tubernacular sky surrounded by orange crates of theology, who scribbled all night rocking and rolling over lofty incantations which in the yellow morning were stanzas of gibberish, who cooked rotten animal lung, heart, feet, tail, borscht, and tortillas dreaming of the pure vegetable kingdom, who plunged themselves under the meat trucks looking for an egg, who threw their watches off the route to cast their ballot for eternity outside time, and alarm clocks fell on their heads every day for the next decade, who cut their wrists 3 times successfully, unsuccessfully, gave up and were forced to open antique stores where they thought they were growing old and cried, who were burned alive in the innocent flannel suits on Madison Avenue mid the blast of leaden verse and tanked-up clatter of the iron regiment of fashion and nitroglycerin shrieks of the fairies of advertising and the mustard gas of sinister intelligent editors who were run down by drunken taxicabs of absolute reality, Who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge? This actually happened and walked away, unknown and forgotten, into the ghostly days of Chinatown soup alleyways and fire trucks, not even one free beer. Who sang out of their windows in despair, fell out of the subway window, jumped into the filthy Passaic, leaped on Negroes, cried all over the streets, danced on broken wine glasses barefoot, smashed pornographic records of nostalgic European 1930s German jazz, finished the whiskey, and threw up groaning into the bloody toilet, moans in their ears, and the blast of colossal steam whistles. Who barreled down the highway of the past, journeying to each other's hot rod Golgotha jail solitude, watch our Birmingham jazz incarnation. Who drove cross country 72 hours to find out if I had a vision, or you had a vision, or he had a vision to find out eternity. Who journeyed to Denver, who died in Denver, who came back to Denver, who waited in vain and watched over Denver, and brooded and loaned in Denver, and finally went away to find out the time, and now Denver is lonesome for her heroes. Who fell on their knees in hopeless cathedrals, playing for each other's salvation, and light and breast, until the sound illuminated its hair for a second. Who crashed through the mines in jail, waiting for the impossible criminals, golden heads, and charmed reality, and the hearts who sang sweet blues to Alcatraz. Who retired to Mexico to cultivate a habit, our Rocky Mount to tender Buddha, our Tangiers to boys, our Southern Pacific to the black locomotive, our Harvard to Narcissus, to Woodland, to the daisy chain, our grave. Who demanded sanity trials, accusing the radio of hypnotism, and were left with their insanity in their heads, in their hands, and a hung jury. Who threw potato salad at CCNY lecturers at Dodism, and subsequently presented themselves on the granite steps of the madhouse with shaven heads and harlequin speech of suicide, demanding instantaneous lobotomy. Who were given instead the concrete void of insulin, metrazole, electricity, hydrotherapy, psychotherapy, occupational therapy, ping pong, and amnesia. Who in humorless protest overturned only one symbolic ping pong table, resting briefly in catatonia, returning years later, truly bald, except for a wig of blood and tears and fingers, to the visible madman doom of the wards of the mad towns of the East. Pilgrim State, Rocklands, and Greystone's Foyton halls, bickering with the echoes of the soul, rocking and rolling in the midnight solitude, Benchdomen's realms of love, dreams of light and nightmare, bodies turned to stone, as heavy as the moon, and the mother finally fucked, and the last fantastic book flung out of the tenement window, and the last door closed at 4 a.m., and the last telephone slammed at the wall in reply, and the last furnished room emptied down to the last piece of mental furniture, a yellow paper rose twisted on a wire hanger in the closet, and even the imagery, that imagery, nothing but a hopeful little bit of hallucination. Ah, Carl, while you are not safe, I'm not safe, and you're not really in the total animal soup of time. And who therefore ran through the icy streets, obsessed with a sudden flash of alchemy, of the use of ellipsis catalog of variable measures and the vibrating plane? Who dreamt and made incarnate gapes in time and space and images juxtaposed and trapped, the archangel of the soul between two visual images, the joined and the elemental verbs, and set the noun and dash conscious together, jumping the sensation of pater omnipotens aeternia duus, to recreate the syntax and measure the poor human prose, and stand before you speechless and intelligent and shaking with shame, rejected yet confessing out the soul to conform to the rhythm of thought in his naked endless head, the madman bum, the angel beat in time, unknown, yet putting down here what might be left to say in time come after death. The rose reincarnate the ghostly images of jazz, the gold horn shadow of the band, and blew the suffering of America's naked mind for love into an Eli, Eli, Lama, Lama sabachthani, saxophone cry.